friends, and welcome to episode 15 of the Rob Breakenridge Show. So great to have you along with us. We've got plenty to get to in this episode, including a couple of interviews lined up for you. In just a moment, we're going to hear from Ted Morton, a professor emeritus at the University of Calgary, also executive fellow at the School of Public Policy. You may recall Ted Morton served as Alberta's Minister of Finance, also served as Minister of Energy. Going back even further, he was one of the authors of the now infamous 2001 Firewall Letter that laid out ways in which Alberta could exercise more autonomy from Ottawa. So we'll get his take on the current debate around all of these issues. We'll also explore an interesting suggestion that he has laid out with regard to the way in which Albertans could effectively have a direct say on what we'd like to see come next. Also today, a closer look at the state of healthcare in Alberta, specifically on the front lines in emergency care. Not only are wait times in Alberta emergency rooms increasing, but the number of patients leaving ERs before they've been seen by a doctor is increasing too. The head of emergency medicine at the Alberta Medical Association is sounding the alarm over what's happening and is also calling on Premier Danielle Smith to join him on shift and witness all of this for herself. Dr. Warren Thirsk will join us later. But off the top here, some breaking news from Thursday evening concerning Canada-U.S. trade relations. We just did a segment on our last episode talking about these trade talks and the hope that maybe we're making some progress toward this agreed-upon July 21st deadline. Well, along comes Donald Trump, who's been throwing around new tariffs all week, threatening Canada with a new 35% tariff. So he posted this letter on social media Thursday evening. August 1st is listed as the date when this would take effect, and it's not clear as of this recording whether there would still be an exemption for trade that's compliant with CUSMA, our trade agreement, our existing trade agreement with the U.S. There's some early indications that that exemption will be kept in place, but that's some important information maybe the president could have included in this rambling letter. The letter again raises the fentanyl issue, even though we haven't really heard anything about fentanyl in months, and frankly, it's pretty evident that the flow of fentanyl from Canada into the U.S. is quite minimal, especially compared to the U.S. southern border. The letter also again raises supply management, which no doubt will be, or I'm sure is, a sticking point in trade talks. Look, we haven't done ourselves any favors here by passing this ridiculous law that legally requires that supply management be completely off the table in any trade talks. And of course, the letter rants again about the trade deficit. Now remember, if you put aside oil and gas, the U.S. has a trade surplus with us. And U.S. refineries benefit quite well from purchasing Canadian oil and selling the refined products at a profit. And look, the U.S. has a trade surplus with Brazil, for example, and Trump just hit them with 50% tariffs this week. So I don't know the trade deficits mean all that much. I don't know if Trump really fully understands or cares about them. And now, of course, Trump is signaling that the European Union may be next. So there's no logic to any of this. It seems like the trade strategy of a madman who's drunk off power. Lost in this debate is the fact that it's Congress, not the president. It's supposed to have final say over tariffs, which are, after all, taxes. Unfortunately, it seems like Republicans in the House and the Senate just seem too afraid of Trump to lift a finger about any of this. And hey, maybe it's a case once again of taco. Trump always chickens out. Right? Trump has previously announced all sorts of wild tariffs, only to back down or hit pause. But I'm not sure we can count on that this time. And regardless, all of this drama and uncertainty is terrible for the economy since it's impossible for businesses to do any sort of long-term planning amid all this chaos. So, hopefully some sanity can prevail here, but if not, this will be bad news for the Canadian economy, bad news for the world economy, and yes, bad news for the U.S. economy. We'll have some follow-up on our next episode. When we come back, a conversation with former Alberta Finance Minister Ted Morton and the latest on the steps being taken in Alberta to push for further autonomy and to use referendums to help make that happen. This is the Rob Breakenridge Show. Next week marks the first in-person town hall being hosted by the province's new Alberta Next panel. Red Deer and Sherwood Park are the only two July events. There will be 3 town halls in August and 5 in September. The Premier says part of this exercise is to generate potential issues or questions that might be put to Albertans in a referendum next year. course, with the dueling petition campaigns on the separation question, it seems almost a given that independence will be one of the questions that Albertans will have a direct say on, but there will likely be others. In fact, that might include some proposals on constitutional amendments. As we've seen in the past, changing the Constitution is no easy task. But earlier this week, Premier Smith posted a video on social media laying out the case for a constitutional amendment referendum and suggesting a number of potential changes that Albertans might wish to weigh in on.
A provincial referendum on some of these ideas is coming in 2026. But what's on that referendum ballot and what happens next for Alberta is up to you. One idea being discussed by the panel is Alberta taking a lead role in working with other provinces to pressure the federal government to amend the Canadian Constitution to empower and better protect provincial rights. Examples of proposed constitutional reforms include the following. 1. Amending the division of powers to indicate that core areas of provincial jurisdiction, including over natural resources and health, are immune from federal legislation, and to also ensure that in shared areas of jurisdiction, such as agriculture and immigration, provincial laws prevail over federal ones. 2. Imposing constitutional limits on the federal spending power in areas of provincial jurisdiction, including a provincial right to opt out of federal spending measures with proper compensation should they so choose. 3. Adhering strictly to representation by population in the House of Commons. Right now, those living in smaller provinces are greatly overrepresented when compared to those living in larger ones. 4. Either abolishing the Senate entirely or having it actually represent provincial interests as originally intended by mandating an elected Senate with the same amount of senators representing each province. 5. Allowing provinces to appoint their own King's Bench and Court of Appeal justices, rather than having those appointments made by the federal government. 6. Expanding the Supreme Court to allow for more justices from Western Canada and making prior service on a province's Court of Appeal a mandatory requirement of becoming a Supreme Court justice. 7. Eliminating the Ottawa residency requirement for judges on federal courts to ensure more Western Canadian representation. And 8. Mandating provincial approval of the appointment of a lieutenant governor to a province by the federal government. There are, of course, many other potential constitutional amendments that are worth discussion, but this is a start. So, should Alberta take a lead role in working with other provinces to pressure the federal government to amend the Canadian Constitution in order to empower and better protect provincial rights? And if so, which of the amendments discussed or other proposals should the Alberta government advocate for?
Okay, so very interesting. We'll see if any of that interests Albertans enough that it would be worth holding a referendum on some or all of these questions. Now, look, I'm not sure how meaningful or achievable some of these changes would be. Like, for example, I'm not sure how useful or worthwhile it would be to amend the Constitution to more clearly spell out that provincial jurisdiction is indeed provincial jurisdiction. And it's hard to see how maybe some of these other changes would actually improve the lives of Albertans. And again, let's remember what it takes to amend the Constitution, right? We have what's referred to as the 750 rule. So not just approval from Parliament, but also from at least 2/3 of the provinces, representing at least 50% of the national population. Now, I mean, look, that's not to say that other provinces wouldn't be sympathetic to some of Alberta's concerns or ideas, but I think we'd have to be pretty strategic in picking and choosing these constitutional battles. But look, clearly there's some combination of ballot initiatives that await us in 2026. One, of course, as noted, is most likely a separation referendum. Our next guest says the use of multiple referendum questions could be a really useful tool for the Alberta government here, and he believes that a separation vote will ultimately not really help Alberta's cause. Ted Morton, as mentioned, Professor Emeritus, University of Calgary, Executive Fellow with the School of Public Policy, previously served as Minister of Finance and Minister of Energy for the Alberta government. He is also author of the book released last year called Strong and Free, My Journey in Alberta Politics. Ted Morton, so great to have you with us. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Rob. Good to be with you again.
I mean, to what extent are you surprised, if you're surprised at all, just the way the federal election went, the way Alberta voted compared to the rest of the country, that we're seeing these conversations, we're seeing this frustration, this discontent right now?
Well, I was shocked. I mean, 6 months, 12 months ago, 6 months ago, the Conservatives still had a 20-point lead in popular vote. That all changed in 6 weeks, and he wasn't beaten by the Liberals and Carney. He was beaten by Trump. It was a whole new set of issues. So deeply disappointed. But again, on the other hand, I think it proves again that in a certain sense, Western Canada is basically irrelevant to the Liberals putting together a majority government. I think they got three MPs out of Saskatchewan and Alberta combined.
Yeah,
and they're 170 MPs. 2/3 of them are just from Quebec and Ontario.
Early signs of Mark Carney is different from Justin Trudeau, but I don't know, different enough? What do you make of what we've seen so far?
Well, he's much smarter. He obviously understands economics and finance much better than Justin. That's not much of. No, he's had an amazing career, but he's certainly in the last decade or more, really 2 decades, he's been pretty deep green, putting the environmental issue at a high level in terms of finance and development. And that, of course, was a big part of the Trudeau legacy. And which did real harm to Alberta and to Western Canada. Well, to all of Canada. We almost have a lost decade under Trudeau, but it was particularly hard on Saskatchewan and Alberta, the primary oil and gas producing provinces. So I've taken a wait and see attitude, give the new guy the benefit of the doubt. I think Premier Smith is doing that too. Carney tends to say the right things, but you and I know that talk is a lot easier than action.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, he was doing that just a few days ago at Stampede,
yes,
and same with his energy minister.
He was learning to flip-flop pancakes.
Yeah, that's right. But in terms of, I mean, you're not just your advice to him and his government, but to the rest of the country, like how seriously should they take Alberta concerns, Alberta frustrations, and in the mood right now, especially?
Well, I think they should, but how serious they take it, I think, will depend on how Premier Smith handles it and what this referendum goes. I think a straight up or down referendum on separation, a yes, no, I don't think that'll have much effect because at the most it would get 20%. And that would send a message to Carney and the rest of Canada, well, Alberta's not leaving. At that, the risk there is, of course, that 20% decides, well, 20% is enough for a new party, so they form a separatist party, and that could spell very bad news for Premier Smith and the Conservatives because you get back into vote splitting. But as you know, I've proposed an alternative approach to sort of a two-question referendum, if you want to get into that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, let's talk about what that might look like, because I know the Premier's open to maybe different referendums on different issues, not just the independence question. Or how could she go about it, do you think?
Well, I saw her briefly at Stampede, and she's interested in, I think, in the two-question referendum. And the example of this is New Zealand did it a couple of decades ago. They wanted to change their electoral system. And the first question is, are you satisfied with the status quo? Yes or no? And then if there's a no vote, then the second question is, which of the following alternatives would you favor? In that case, it had to do with change in electoral system. And they actually, there was 80% support for change, and it led to a new electoral system for New Zealand. But in our case, the problem with the straight up and down succeed or no is that there'll be 20% of the people that would maybe separate in Alberta. There's 20% that are happy with the status quo, but I think that leaves the majority of us, 60%, that we're not happy with the status quo, but we don't want there's a big space in between those two alternatives. And with the two question referendum, are you satisfied with the status or happy with the status quo? No. Then question 2, you could set out a list of possible alternatives from some of the policy changes that Premier Smith and Moe have requested, to structural changes like the Fair Deal Panel, policing, tax collection, pension. I guess the furthest end would be, I guess there could be sovereignty association, the Quebec model, or complete. But that would give, I'd say, the 60% of us that are kind of in between the two extremes a voice. And well, I guess I'd be curious to hear from you. How many people would vote yes to question one, that they're satisfied with the status quo?
Well, especially worded that way, I think it would be a low number. But yeah, I think there's a way to frame it.
Particularly after the
Sure.
the results of the spring election, because expectations and hopes were so high that at Stampede, people were having fun and so forth. But boy, there's a lot of, well, a lot of frustration and built up frustration, and sort of this, like I said, in a certain sense, under the status quo, the Liberals, remember, I've said this and written this many times, the old 1980 Trudeau campaign. It wasn't their slogan, but inside it was the strategy: screw the West and we'll take the rest.
Right.
And given the differences in population and where the oil and gas is, it's pretty easy to buy a lot of votes in Ontario and Quebec with revenue transfers from Western Canada.
Do you think Danielle Smith's hands are tied at all? I mean, the Citizens Initiative legislation gives people the opportunity, right, to get a petition, shape a question. So if a petition succeeds on a separation question, do you think the Premier has enough wiggle room to say, okay, but we're going to kind of do it this way. Like, we're going to take this approach with these different questions and include that as an option. Do you think she could do that?
I don't know the new legislation on referendums well enough to know if you could actually substitute a question.
Right.
If a group got together, the right number of signatures confirmed for a specific question, it seems to me, I assume that statute would mandate that. But the government obviously has the discretion to add more than one question, and the second question could be the two question option that I've recommended.
And in terms of some of those alternatives, like what kind of options could be on the table or could be put to the citizens, do you think?
Well, it would be a spectrum. I mean, the minimal ones would just be the changes she's already asked for, she and Mo. I think they made a list of, 8 or 9, repeal of Bill 69, get rid of the West Coast tanker ban, lift the emissions cap on the electrical system. For those types of policy changes, those would all be very good policy changes for Alberta and I think for Canada. But a policy change is just a policy change. The next government, or even this government a year or two down the road, can change that. The next level up might be the fair deal reforms, the doing our own policing, collecting our own provincial taxes, maybe having an Alberta pension plan like Quebec. There's been some discussion of that already. The Kenny Fair Deal panel, it recommended all of those. Ontario and Quebec already do one or the other or both. So that'd be a significant change, but it's still very much in the ballpark. It's already being done in Ontario and or Quebec. The next level would be, closer to Quebec, Sovereignty Association, whatever that might mean. Although the Sovereignty Act, I'd say, is a step in that direction. And then at the extreme end is outright separation. So, but that, as I said, that would give the 60% of us that aren't either pro status quo or it'd give us a chance to, and I think the next election is still over 2 years away. So I think it would make for an interesting public discussion and a positive public discussion over the next 2 years. And not just, certainly amongst Albertans, but also with Saskatchewan, with BC, and with Carney and the rest of Canada.
I was going to say, isn't it interesting? Because, we could flash back a quarter century ago when we were talking about the firewall letter. And you, of course, are one of the authors of that. It laid out a lot of these issues. So what do you make of the fact that, here we are 25 years later? So, still talking about these issues, but maybe now finally, I don't know, there's more seriousness to those conversations?
Well, certainly for me, there is. I've, in my most recent book, the political autobiography, Strong and Free, that I released last year, and in my public speaking, and I think in some of my op-eds, I make it very clear that despite best efforts of a lot of good people, Preston Manning, Stephen Harper, Jason Kenney, Danielle, myself. I think Alberta and Saskatchewan are worse off, more vulnerable today than we were 25 years ago. And I think, again, despite those efforts, what we tried hasn't worked in terms of making Alberta less subject to very aggressive and destructive policies from Ottawa, almost always Liberal Party policies, and focus particularly now the trade-offs between climate change and CO2 emissions and development of oil and gas, pipelines, all of that. So I've been very explicit because I'm not quite sure whether I've chosen this or fallen into it. Spoken to a number of younger audiences in the last year, and I look at them. I say, we worked hard. I think we were good. We were capable. We did, but it hasn't worked. And if you want to make Alberta less vulnerable to predatory and destructive federal policies, the beneficiaries of the status quo don't give up their advantages voluntarily. They got to be pushed. And I think the referendum, particularly the way I've suggested it, would be the kind of push that we need to move things down the road.
Well, and tell me what you think of this, because it feels like we kind of got two baskets almost. Like there's the things that we're asking Ottawa to do, we're demanding Ottawa do, that we're sort of at the mercy of whether they agree to that. But then there are things that Alberta can do on its own. Like Alberta can set up a provincial pension plan. Alberta can set up a provincial police force. Alberta can tell the feds to take a hike when it comes to pharmacare or childcare or things that are our jurisdiction. So I don't know. Is it important to differentiate the two, do you think?
Well, yes. Our leverage in Ottawa is very, very small. But those half steps, whether it's policing, tax collection, pension, in other words, move things that Quebec are, that the more Alberta has autonomy in all of those areas, the more leverage it gives Alberta premiers, and not just today's premier, Danielle Smith, but premiers down the road. It gives them leverage then to, I would suggest, extract fair policies, particularly on the energy climate trade-offs down the road.
So given where things are at, where things are going at the new Alberta Next panel heading out, as you say, the Premier seems open to having some other issues go to a referendum. Are you optimistic that we are going to see that in some form?
Well, again, I read what you read. It seems to me this Alberta Prosperity Project is very well organized, well financed. They claim, what do they claim? A couple 100,000 signatures already. Yeah. They have lots of advertising going on. So I don't think there's much doubt that, particularly with the lower threshold for a citizen initiative referendum, the new referendum rules, that question will be on the ballot. The question is, I guess what I'm sort of lobbying for, arguing for, is a second question, which poses kind of the broader question of, are you really happy with the status quo? And if not, then how about these options? And like I said, that the next election, that would be part of the next election, 2027. It's a couple years away, and I think it'd be a good debate. Keep you busy on your podcast.
Yes, which we like. But as you say, I mean, your concern is that if it's just a separation referendum, that we lose some leverage. Then if it's done, it's over.
It tells us what we already know. 20% of Albertans, I guess, are ready to leave, but 80%. So, but what I think that gives us less leverage, because people in Ottawa, Ontario, Quebec say, 80% of Albertans are against separation, but it doesn't mean they're happy with the status quo. So there you have my take on it.
But as you mentioned too, I mean, there is that potential threat, though, politically to Danielle Smith, and you've been through it in Alberta politics with the divided right and the vote splitting. Are we maybe headed in that direction?
When I got taken out by the Wild Rose in 2012, and both their candidate and most of the people who worked for their candidate were people that had worked for me in 2006 in the 2006 leadership. So. keeping it, well, left and right, keeping parties together is a big challenge. And when you don't keep them together, that can be a big price to pay.
All right. Well, interesting weeks and months ahead for sure. We'll leave it there. As mentioned, your book, it's out from last year. It's called Strong and Free, My Journey in Alberta Politics. Ted Morton, thanks so much for your insight on all of this. Appreciate you joining us here.
I enjoy talking with you again, Rob. Thank you.
Okay, there you go. That is Ted Morton. He's a professor emeritus at the University of Calgary, executive fellow at the School of Public Policy. Coming up shortly, we're going to take a look at the state of healthcare in Alberta. And I mean, look, obviously, Alberta's not the only province dealing with challenges and pressures and wait times in healthcare. But it is a situation here that the Alberta government needs to deal with. I mean, if we talk about jurisdiction, clearly this is the Alberta government's responsibility. And in particular, the situation in emergency rooms. We're seeing wait times in ERs increasing. One concerning element to that is an increase in the number of patients who leave the ER before they've been seen by a doctor. So the Alberta Medical Association is sounding the alarm about all of this. We'll hear from the head of emergency medicine for the AMA, Dr. Warren Thirsk, coming up in a moment. My name is Rob Breakenridge. We're back after this. Concern being raised over the state of emergency care in Alberta, the lengthy wait times people are facing in ERs, and the fact that many are just giving up and leaving. The head of emergency medicine for the Alberta Medical Association calling attention to this and even calling on the Premier herself to come witness this firsthand, maybe spend some time on shift. Dr. Warren Thirsk is with us on the program. Dr. Thirsk, good to have you with us here.
Thank you for having me.
Kind of give us an overview, first of all, of what we're seeing. I know it does vary from region to region, hospital to hospital, but we are seeing increased wait times. There is this concern that we're seeing people, give up and leave. What's kind of the overview right now, first of all?
I think the overview of one is just overwhelmed healthcare system, right, on all fronts. Everywhere you see a queue or a wait time, there is a lack of what we need to look after the person who needs it. So it really is a system-wide issue at this point. And an emergency is just where I see it.
What are the factors, though, that are causing this?
Well, there's too many to quickly describe. I think that the best way to say it is this is a multiple decades long decision to trim services until the backlogs are evident in the people that we care about, the Albertans who need healthcare.
I mean, we got a growing population, so I mean that's part of the challenge we're facing. But we've got concern over measles. That's a pressure point on the system right now. Are we seeing other factors in that sense?
I think that measles is a great example of a healthcare system that is not meeting the needs of Albertans for a variety of reasons. And then measles is the result. Measles is just a virus trying to do what viruses do, spread to people and have its own existence. And as a healthcare system, we would do our best to prevent people from suffering measles because measles is bad for people. It hurts people. And that's its role as a virus in our lives.
Yeah. It's one thing to see the numbers on paper, to see the wait times or see survey results, but to see it in person and talk about then why you've urged the Premier then to maybe come and spend some time on shift and see it for herself.
Well, we currently seem to have a very top-down healthcare system. So everything comes from the top and it doesn't seem to trickle down to those of us on the front line. And I think that people who manage numbers and that this is their existence fail to see the person behind the number. It's easy to make decisions with numbers because you can create a false sense of control and an artificial sense of reality. So a wait time is a good example. It's an average wait time that we are looking at. You can go online and find it, and it changes minute by minute. And you think that you have control. Oh, I'm going to choose my wait time. I'm going to go to this hospital and pick 2 hours or 5 hours or, whatever. So it gives us artificial control. So I would say, okay, let's go to that hospital with a wait time. Let's make it 2 hours. Let's make it simple, 2 hours. Let's say there's 30 people in that waiting room, which is, depending on the hospital, a small number. 2 hours means that 50%, half 15 people will wait longer than 2 hours. That's what that number means. Half will wait less than 2 hours, but not zero. And so we are taking someone who is in pain, who is suffering, who is vomiting, who has uncontrollable diarrhea, who has something really bad for their unplanned medical event, because you didn't schedule this and you certainly didn't go looking for it. And so now we're making them wait before they even see anyone, before they get any help, any care. And so behind those numbers are 30 people with various amounts of suffering. As the physician on the front line who sees them, I will see each one of those people. And then they will be upset. The one who waited 4 hours while vomiting can look at me in the eyes and say, why did I wait so long? And I have no answer as an individual physician. Right. I do my best to gain an alliance, but that's all I can do. I do my best to treat them once I get to them. That's all I can do. They're grateful and they don't complain. Albertans need to find their voices and start actually complaining about these wait times.
Right. I mean, 2 hours almost seems on the low end in some circumstances. In the big cities, we've seen wait times approaching into the double digits. And not just the time people are waiting, but the circumstances, right? Waiting rooms that are overflowing, right? Patients basically sitting in hallways.
Sitting in ambulance stretchers on hallways, sitting in stretchers on hallways with no care, with no limited access to bathroom facilities, no one providing water, food, things that we would consider unacceptable. When smaller wait times happened in the airline industry, there was a massive push for accountability and change. We have a new federal agency telling us how it's going to go. And yet Albertans will put up with worse wait times for worse conditions. I mean, an airline plane flight is potentially deferrable. Yes, you're upset you didn't get to see your family. Yes, you're upset you missed your vacation. You have lots of reasons to be upset, but you're not potentially dying. You're not in pain. Your limbs aren't fractured. You're not bleeding. You're not vomiting. Like, it's a different world, and yet we accept so much less in the circumstance because we're so grateful for the care we get. And I think all frontline workers, in fairness, do a great job. We do a great job of mollifying this and making this better for the person at the time so that it suddenly becomes acceptable. And I think the numbers have made it acceptable. We talk about numbers, not the suffering. And that's what I would like the Premier and anyone who deals with numbers to come and actually see those numbers. That's the difference.
And to see that suffering, to see people waiting and agonizing and just feeling it as physicians, like you're just kind of drowning in all of this. Like you want to help, you can't, right? There's nothing you can do. What kind of pressure does that put on those who are trying to deal with all of this?
It's haunting. As I've said before, it's haunting. It's soul wrenching to be a helper and not be able to help everyone in front of you, to be overwhelmed with the numbers of people coming at you. There's been decades of cuts. So going back to the 90s, there was the Bear-Stoddard report, which under poor number assumptions was a model of how many physicians we would need. And so we cut medical schools, we cut physicians, we've cut nurses. Everything was cut with the idea that people wouldn't need it. And that's the thing about healthcare and why the emergency department is the window into the real problems is, you don't need healthcare until you need it. It's guaranteed most of us as humans will need it someday, myself included. And so we don't want to provide for something we're not using today. And we don't want to plan for tomorrow necessarily. And we certainly don't want to pay for tomorrow. And we certainly have lost maybe the Canadian sense that we should be looking out for each other and paying for other people. So I'm not necessarily providing for your health emergency. I don't know you well enough, Rob, to know what it would be. But, you're a human. So at some point, something will happen, just like something will happen to me. Something's happening to my parents right now. Something's happening to my aunt and uncle. So all of us have family members. All of us will know someone who needs healthcare. And so the question is, do you want someone there, or how long do you think the wait should be for that healthcare? When it's your family member, most of us think that the waits are unacceptable. Most of us think that it's under-resourced.
One of the consequences we saw confirmed in this survey from the AMA is that people leave, people give up, people go home. They just can't bear the wait, which is worrying because those conditions don't go away. And does that lead to something worse down the road? What are the consequences of that?
Well, I mean, the unknown is the unknown. So we don't know because those people don't register the next day. Many of them register the next day. Like the number of people who say, I tried yesterday and I gave up. I went home for some sleep. I hoped it went away, but it didn't. So I'm back. All right. So we see those people come back, but they don't get connected to that first number. So they're not connected. And like they tell me anecdotally what they've done, but they don't register in the numbers. So the number of people don't see those folks, right? Once they go, it's almost like the people who control the numbers, the folks who make decisions want to believe that it's not a problem, right? Or they didn't need the emergency department. There was an interesting call-in on the CBC radio yesterday that I took, that I got to listen to. And a call-in person named Scott shared his daughter's story. They went to a hospital in Edmonton. His daughter had an allergic reaction in her scalp. Now, allergic reactions could be potentially life-threatening. They come with rashes, but they have the potential to be bad. They were triaged and waited and waited and waited. And after a number of hours, they gave up waiting. And they went home with their itchy scalp, hoping that it would be okay. And it turned out to be okay. And I'm really glad for that person and their family that it wasn't a life-threatening allergic reaction, but it's in the pool of unknown. And so this choice of leaving is a test. It's almost a test of time, right? Will I get better? Will I not? To put a harder lens on it, it's almost a Darwinian choice. You're making a choice that maybe I'll be okay. Some people are, some people aren't. And that is tragic that we've forced them to wait so long. They made a choice, a hard choice, and they suffer consequences that we are completely unaware of as a system.
I suppose it is true, as the Alberta government says. I mean, this isn't a uniquely Alberta problem. ERs in other provinces face pressures too, but it doesn't absolve the government of responsibility to address what's going on here. So, as you say, it's a multifaceted problem, but what do we need, or where do we even begin here?
I think we need to start fighting with other provinces properly, competing for resources by appropriately, funding at least the healthcare system. We need to stabilize our nurses by giving them proper salaries. Every few years, rip up the doctor's contract, fight with the nurses, offer them 1% in a setting of 30% inflation. What we are doing in the name of cost control is not what the healthcare system needs when it is already short, right? And those decisions were made decades ago. It takes a decade to train a physician to be a functioning physician in our system. It takes 4 years to train an RN. We keep trying to train people less, which isn't helpful. And certainly people who are faced with, less experienced healthcare workers may notice that. But we need to reverse some of these decisions. Those decisions 20 years ago mean that the pool is short. And so, yes, you might have to pay more than another province to attract the physicians here. You might need to form a stable relationship with the physicians or the nurses that doesn't involve this, well, my number says this, because then the nurses leave. The physicians have left. We're short, but it's across the country. So if everyone's short, what is Alberta going to do against those other provinces with looking at that to say we need to be better? This goes back to numbers. I've seen some very interesting use of numbers to make decisions and say, oh, well, we still pay the best in the country. That's manipulation of numbers. It's manipulation of people. And I think the fact that there's no one there to look after you for any queue in any part of our healthcare system says that it doesn't really jive. And that's the difference. I need a nursing home. There's a big wait. I need a joint replaced, a big wait. I need cancer care. There's a big wait. There's a big wait for every major thing in our system, essentially, including unplanned, unscheduled healthcare problems like the emergency department.
And the thing is, we see the longer wait times in the cities, but maybe that's a consequence of what's happening rurally, where we see closures and people are forced to go to the city to go to ER. So it's not just an urban or a rural, it's kind of across the board, isn't it?
It's across the board. It's everywhere. But imagine closing a rural site. That is horrific. That tells everyone in that area that you don't get anything. You are on your own until you can get to the bigger city. That's a wait time. If it's an hour drive to the big city, that's travel time is a wait. So that is another form of delay, right? Well, you've cut yourself with your kitchen knife and you're bleeding and your finger, you cut the tendon and you can't work your finger, just something simple. But now I got to drive an hour and a half to the city to wait another 6 hours in a department because I'm not dying, but I certainly need healthcare. So my hand is functional again. That's a simple example of a minor problem. Like we don't always have to talk life and death. That's where people want it to be dramatic. I'm having a heart attack. I'm dying. Well, if it's an hour for you to get to the hospital with a bad heart attack, you might just die. That happens all the time. But let's just say it's something I need. Cut the tendon in my finger. I can't work my hand. I can't work my job. I can't farm. I can't do what I'm doing in my rural setting. You need your finger. You need healthcare. It's unplanned. I didn't plan to cut myself. I need surgery. Unplanned. Needs capacity. So this delay that the rural folks would find to drive to their city to then line up with all the city folk who are waiting as well is just an extra delay, right? So it's across the system. I have elderly parents. We might be looking at placing them in a nursing home. It's a long wait, could be years. When I see a patient with arthritis whose knee, they can't walk on their knee hardly. I put a needle in the knee with a temporary injection. I say, you need to line up now. It could take you 2 years to get your knee replaced. Line up today for something 2 years from now. That's the type of wait times that we've considered acceptable. Cancer care. I've had a relative with cancer. I had to say, expect a 3-month wait for the cancer specialist to get to you. It's okay. I think it's a slow growing cancer. How does that feel? How does it feel as a human with inside knowledge of the weights in the system to tell my loved one, you're going to wait 3 months, but you're okay. I'm sure of it. I love you. You'll be okay. 3 months of anxiety. You've been told you have cancer. We're going to wait now. That's not how people want to be treated.
Oh, no kidding. Well, we'll leave it there for now. Dr. Thirsk, appreciate your insight on all of this, and I guess we'll see where it all goes from here, but thanks for making some time for us here today.
I see that you're wrapping. I'd like to offer a reframe for everyone.
Yeah.
We framed healthcare as business, and business deals with numbers, and business deals with cuts and margins and things that aren't human. We need to reframe healthcare as a people problem. We need to reframe it as something where there's a person in that number, behind that number. And then we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing for the person, not the number? Let's talk about people.
Absolutely. Dr. Thirsk, thanks again.
Thank you.
All right, once again, that is Dr. Warren Thirsk. He is president of the emergency medicine section with the Alberta Medical Association. AlbertaDoctors.org is their website. Listen, that's where we're going to leave it for this episode of the podcast. Don't forget to find us, follow us, our Substack page, robbreakenridge.ca, which is where this podcast is hosted. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and other podcast platforms. You can check out and subscribe at our YouTube channel as well. We'll have a new episode for you coming up on Tuesday. I would imagine we'll have much more on the whole Canada-U.S. trade drama, as we mentioned off the top in this episode, these new tariffs announced by Trump, and we'll see what else he announces between now and then, so we'll certainly have more on that. We're also going to talk about protests in Canada, protest limits, protest rights, the Canadian Constitution Foundation, with a guide for Canadians to understand their rights when they're taking part in a protest. But also we're seeing various jurisdictions, including apparently Ottawa, considering new kind of bubble zone protest laws, like restricting protests from certain areas. So we'll see how that all fits in. So we'll have that conversation, some other issues we'll get to as well. Again, robbreakenridge.ca is the website. You can contact us, drop a comment on the page. You can email as well, all that information at the website. Have yourselves a fantastic weekend, folks, and we'll talk to you on Tuesday. Take care.